Hi everyone, in this screencast we're going to talk about Chapter 11 in your AIS textbook, Computer Crime and Information Technology Security. Our objectives for Chapter 11, we want to talk about Carter's taxonomy of computer crime and the different types of computer crime that are encompassed in that taxonomy. We're going to identify and describe business risks and overall threats to information systems. We'll name and describe some common types of computer criminals, discuss ways to prevent and detect computer crime. We'll also talk about COBIT's information criteria and accountability framework, and then just describe briefly how COBIT can be used to strengthen a company's internal controls against computer crime. So computer crime can be classified into kind of four categories according to Carter's taxonomy. We want to keep in mind that a single crime, a single incident could fit more than one category in a lot of cases. So the first category is target. Criminal here is targeting the system itself or the data kind of being housed in or around that system. So the primary goal here is to impact confidentiality, availability, and or integrity. So confidentiality, right, we're talking about instances where a criminal is trying to expose social security numbers, credit card numbers, any kind of confidential data that they might use for either malicious purposes or just to embarrass that company overall. If we're talking about impacting availability, we're talking primarily about denial of service attacks. So those attacks where a hacker or criminal is trying to bring a site down. So that's recently happened in the news to several companies, most notably some of the bigger banks over the last few years. Wells Fargo, Bank of America have all been the target of denial of service attacks from mostly foreign hackers who, again, trying to make those sites unavailable to the customers of those institutions. Instrumentality is the second category of computer crime. Instrumentality means that the computer is being used to commit the crime. So the computer or the system itself is not the target of said crime, but again is just being used to facilitate that action. Incidental, the third category, means that the computer really isn't even required to commit that crime, but it may make the life easier for the criminal, might decrease the traceability of that action. So always think here of an employee stealing money from a company. Maybe they have access to the cash drawer and they can just take the money, but it certainly makes it easier if they can use the accounting system to kind of cover their tracks, make it look like the sales never happened or that cash was never collected or whatever the case may be. And then the last category, associated, we're talking about new versions of old crimes. So the presence or prevalence of computers in the internet has kind of changed more traditional crimes in certain circumstances. And some examples here might be things as simple as harassment. So employees could always harass each other, walking down the hall, calling each other names, whatever, as silly as that may seem. But the computer has made that a little easier to do. It's kind of changed the dynamics of that. So now people don't trash each other face to face or by mouth. They trash each other on Twitter or Facebook or the company blog or whatever the case may be. Some risks and threats to information systems for us to consider. First being fraud. So fraud, we're talking about theft of information, and that could be kind of personal confidential information or financial information. Things like data diddling would also be in this category. Data diddling means we're changing the information to make it incorrect, right? To change its meaning, its accuracy, or its usefulness. The second category here, error, we're talking about things as simple as an entry error, accidental mistake by an employee, to a programmatic error, something done intentionally to either steal money, steal information, again, change information, or otherwise kind of foul things up. Service interruption or delays, again, we're talking about things like denial of service attacks. Anything that can prevent the company from conducting its normal business, meet its deadlines, or anything along those lines. These types of risks could be, again, accidental. We have systems risks that kind of go along with any automated operations. They could also be as a result of willful neglect. So maybe we didn't put enough kind of thought behind some of those automated processes, and maybe things are breaking not intentionally, but something we could easily avoid. And then, of course, there could be malicious behavior involved. So if our employees are intentionally bringing the systems down, or if hackers are trying to break into systems or websites to bring those down, again, that would fit this general category of interruption or delays. Disclosure of confidential information, the fourth bullet point there. Again, we want to make sure that we are adhering to privacy laws in terms of how we protect our sensitive data, our customer data, our employee data, and so on. We also want to make sure we go far above and beyond that, so we can maintain the trust of those customers and employees. So we need to take proper steps to make sure any confidential information or any information that's even potentially confidential, potentially sensitive, is well protected. Intrusions, our fifth point there. We're talking about intrusions for profit and or for fun. So hackers or computer criminals might try to break into a system to steal information or to steal financial resources, or to kind of bring that company down for a period of time. Or they might just be screwing around, trying to have some fun, trying to see what they can break and what they can get away with. Information theft, the second to last bullet point. We're talking again about any kind of threat to our trade secrets, our customer information, our employee information, our research and development information. We certainly want to be able to protect those advances we might be making in certain products and services so that our customers can't steal them, or some hacker can't break into our system and kind of publish our new findings on the internet. And then the last point, information manipulation. This kind of category, this threat is the hardest to detect and relatively easy to commit. So it's really a risk at every stage of information processing. And manipulation, again, kind of encompasses both accidental and intentional manipulation, if you will. So again, we want to make sure we've addressed proper risks in terms of systems used by our employees, things that we can prevent in terms of unintentional errors, and then also those manipulations that would come from external sources on a more intentional manner. A few more risks and threats for us here. So malicious software, we're talking about malware, viruses, worms, Trojan horses, logic bombs, all those kind of things that hackers or employees, for that matter, could plan into the system and kind of bring things to a halt, blow up data, kind of just delay our operations in some way. Denial of service, we already talked about. That's really, again, just an attack that's trying to prevent any proper operation of the particular targeted system and access by the users or customers who would use that system. Website defacements. I don't think I've seen any of these in the news lately. We're talking about things like digital graffiti. Maybe a hacker would hack into Google's main page, good luck with that, and kind of spray paint their name on it, so to speak, or some group that they support, or take a shot at some political figure, anything along those lines. And then extortion, really talking about blackmail there. So criminal gets access to a system and or information, and rather than doing something with that per se, they use it as kind of a bargaining chip to get some demand met from that organization or from some political body. We have a few types of computer criminals to consider, and again, these are very general categories, and a certain criminal could certainly fit more than one description here. First category is script kiddie. That's anyone who is a relatively inexperienced hacker. They don't really know how to write code or build a virus or a logic bomb or anything like that, but they do know enough to kind of steal someone else's code and make that work. So you or I could certainly go online and probably find code for certain types of viruses or Trojan horses, and we may be able to figure out how to use that, and it probably wouldn't even be that tough to find. So again, script kiddie is someone who really isn't a programmer or a hacker by definition, but they are able to kind of make use of others' work in kind of furthering that annoyance. For purposes of our definition, hackers are going to be anyone who invades an information system for a malicious purpose. So they have some kind of negative result in mind. whether that's stealing information, bringing a system down, or really anything along those lines. Cyber criminals are hackers driven by some financial gain. So again, they're trying to steal some kind of financial resource, or they're trying to gain control of a system and use that as a bargaining chip to get control over some financial resource, or anything that fits that description. Organized crime, that's not really the mob, it's not the Sopranos that we're talking about, but organized crime for our purpose from a computer criminal perspective, we're talking about those groups that execute spam operations or phishing, trying to use legitimate looking website or email to trick people into giving them credit card numbers or wiring them money or whatever the case may be. Also, extortion could kind of fall in here too. If there's a group that's trying to use sensitive information to kind of get some demand met from another group, that could fit into organized crime. Corporate spies, as the name implies, those trying to gain access to trade secrets, customer information, maybe even employee information to poach another company's employees. Computer terrorists, typically targeting some financial system or infrastructure. So maybe they're going to try to bring down the water system of a city, or the part of the nuclear energy plant that's online, or mess up the banking system or anything along those lines. And then insiders, any employee really, but probably more specifically information technology employees in our company. Usually they have the keys to everything within IT, so they may have access on the network to pretty much do whatever they want. So an insider from a criminal perspective, again, some employee who is stealing information or getting access to systems they really shouldn't have to use that information for some kind of personal gain. Internal control issues for us to consider as far as information security goes. We need to make sure that we have controls implemented to achieve confidentiality, data integrity, and availability. So again, confidentiality, we're just talking about making sure that we've taken steps to protect all of our information, all of our sensitive information from unauthorized disclosure. So we want to make sure that our customers' social security numbers and credit card numbers aren't ending up online, and they're not ending up in the hands of other companies. Same with our employee information. Again, anything that's even potentially sensitive. Data integrity speaks to how clean our data is. So are we keeping it free from malicious modification or theft or destruction, but also that accidental modification? So do we have controls in place to make sure that our employees can't accidentally delete, an employee or customer name or number, or anything along those lines? And then availability. So we want to make sure that all of our data can be obtained in whatever time frame needed for our operations. So can our sales force get access to customer data in a timely manner? Do they have updated customer data to be able to contact those customers to sell them more products and services? And things of that nature. We have three different general categories of controls to consider with regard to information security. The first is physical controls. We're talking about controls that protect the physical aspects of the system from malicious or accidental damage. So do we have locks on all the doors to the computer rooms? Do we make employees badge in and out of the building? Do we have security guards at the gate and so on? Also, how do we protect the physical assets themselves? So do we have sprinklers in place, fire alarms, generators, so that in the case of a power outage or a fire, we don't lose any data in transit? Second category is technical controls. So we're talking there about any safeguards built into the systems themselves to protect the electronic aspects of the system. So do we have firewalls in place that prevent outside access to the system? Are we using proper encryption to protect our data should anyone get a hold of that data? Do we have proper access control in place? Antivirus software, intrusion detection, any of those things that will protect the electronic aspect, either the data or access to that data over the network. And then the third category, administrative controls, we're talking about our general rules there, our management constraints as far as some operational procedures. So do we have the appropriate security policies in Are employees properly trained? Are they properly supervised? Do we have periodic security reviews or audits to take a look at how these rules are being implemented and whether they're being followed or not? One common administrative control that we consider periodically are things like employee access roles. So what employees have access to what systems? Does the IT department the only one that can change an employee's password if they're not that employee? Who can install software on each computer? A lot of times we want to make sure that we're segregating duties, and our administrative controls can certainly help us with that general control goal. Our next topic to talk about is COBIT. The Information Systems Audit and Control Association, ISACA, developed the COBIT framework, COBIT standing for Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology. Unlike the COSO framework, COBIT provides more specific guidance as far as IT controls go. If you recall, the COSO framework was a very general, kind of wide-reaching, suggestive model, whereas COBIT provides a little more in the way of nuts and bolts. So there's 4 domains of knowledge in that framework: plan and organize, acquire and implement, deliver and support, and then monitor and evaluate. A lot of those fairly self-explanatory, but plan and organize, again, we're talking about what kind of things go into the planning and organization of our overall control environment. Acquiring and implementing, how are we getting a hold of these information resources? How are we putting them into place? How are we operating them? Delivery and support, how are we maintaining those resources? How are we making sure that, again, the operations are executed properly? And then monitoring and evaluating, checking to make sure we are doing all those things correctly. 3 points of view we need to consider. First being business objectives. So how does each domain relate to the overall goals of the organization? How do these information resources and the controls that kind of protect them, how do they relate to our overall goal in terms of serving our customers? Information technology resources. So again, what IT resources, what computers, what networks, what systems, and so on are needed in each domain. And then IT processes, how should we manage all these resources? So once we have the actual nuts and bolts in place, how are we going to maintain proper administrative controls and those kind of operational rules to protect all these things? COBIT also defines information criteria. So these are the characteristics that information should have to make it most useful. This kind of fits in with a discussion we had much earlier in the semester about information criteria from a research standpoint. But this has 7 different criteria within the COBIT framework. First being effectiveness. So how relevant is that information to the business process in which it resides? And is that information being delivered in a timely manner? Is it correct, accurate? Is it consistent? And is it usable? So is that information complete? Does it contain exactly what we need? And again, is it being delivered in a timely manner so that the process or processes that depend on it can function properly? Information efficiency, we're talking just about the use of our information resources in providing information and whether that use is efficient and kind of reaching toward that optimal point. Confidentiality, again, we've hammered this one in this chapter. Are we protecting our sensitive or our potentially sensitive information? Integrity, again, is that data accurate, complete, and is it in accordance with expectations and business value from a customer, employee, system perspective? So is that information free of errors, either unintentional or intentional errors? Is it clean? Availability. So here we're talking about whether the information is ready when we need it. So whether the process or processes that depend on it can get access to that information on demand. Compliance, we're talking about whether information complies with any laws or regulations or even contractual arrangements that it might be subject to. So in terms of sensitive information, compliance would deal with things like HIPAA, which are rules around healthcare or patient information and the protection of the privacy with regards to that patient information. And then the last one, reliability of information, we're talking about primarily reporting obligations. So does management have all the information necessary to publish audited financial statements to the street? Do they have the information necessary to sign off with regards to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, right, to attest to the financial statements and internal controls of the organization? All of that would fit under reliability. Your textbook had a quick look at the COVID accountability framework, kind of a pictorial view. So I don't need you to know every single little bit of this, but we want to get a general overview of what's happening here. So we're looking at the reporting relationships within an organization. And for purposes of discussion, let's consider just kind of a public company, your average public company. So stakeholders at the top here for a public company, we're primarily talking about shareholders, right? Stock owners. So those stakeholders hold the board of directors accountable for providing information around reporting. The board of directors in turn discloses that financial and control information to those stakeholders. Board of directors on the other side is holding IT and information security management accountable for the protection of that information. And that management is disclosing information about control to the board of directors. So kind of behind the scenes here, we have the management of IT and security interacting with internal audit within that company and also interfacing with external audit, kind of a triangular relationship here. Internal audit is providing information to the audit committee, right? The audit committee being independent of that function, but the internal auditors kind of answer to them. And then also the external auditors would be providing information to that same audit committee. Audit committee is convening to determine the usefulness of that information, the reliability of that information, whether that information is sufficient. And then the audit committee is providing, along with the external auditors, that same information to the stakeholders. So shareholders would often not kind of get formal reports from an audit committee, but they'd certainly get that external auditor's opinion. So if KPMG audited our company and provided an audit opinion about our financial statements and our controls, that would certainly be made public to the shareholders of the company. And those are the types of things you can actually read about on our SEC Edgar website that we looked at in class last week. That does it for Chapter 11. Please take a look at some of your practice questions and give some of those a shot for further review in class.